pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for May 8th, 2018. It's Tuesday, and today on the show, of course, Duane Rollins is on the line as always to talk about Vancouver and what's going on with the Whitecaps. Mccoll of AFTN Canada away from the numbers. Michael, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Morning, Michael. And Kevin, long-term listeners will understand that I needed to have a Caps-focused show today, so we'll leave it at that. So we'll talk about the Whitecaps to start. Michael, it's been a strange start to the season and kind of a struggling start over the past 5 weeks. A lot of people out in Vancouver seem to be frustrated with the direction of the club. So let me start by asking you just that. Are you one of those people that feel that this club is not moving in the right direction at this point?
Yeah, definitely. There seems a lot of issues. Not all of them are on the pitch ones. It goes way deeper than just Carl Robinson or the players. It's just the whole makeup of the club. And can this club compete in the new era, really, of MLS? And it looks like the answer is no.
Well, yeah, and what does that mean exactly? I mean, money is the easy answer to it, but is there more to it than that?
I mean, money is a big part of it, but it's just the whole ethos of it. And I know it's kind of difficult to say that the club is not competing. If you look at the standings and the club is sitting in third spot, and that is what Carl Robinson said at training on Monday. He was asked, where is the club right now? And he said, well, we're third. But that masks everything, because really, points per game, they're seventh. And it isn't just down to money, it just feels the whole ethos of the club. A number of top players come here and they don't perform. And then when that happens season upon season, you have to ask, is it the players? Is it the strategy? Is it the coaching? And it's really everything combined.
When we're looking at the 4 defeats in a row for Vancouver now, of course you have the Kai Kamara injury, but the way they happened, the way the team looked, and the brand of soccer they were playing, if you want to use that expression, were not fan-pleasing. Is there a danger to erode some of the progress made 2 years ago in their playoff, nice playoff run? It wasn't as deep as expected, but they had a great season too. What is the ceiling as well? I'm wondering, because if you look at the type of recruitments, transfer, roster movement they made, some of them are marquee matchup, but some people would say a clear vision might be missing with a different type of mismatched parts put together. What do you think, Michael?
The one thing that has really been missing for a couple of seasons now is a real difference maker. Now, the last player we probably had in Vancouver that was that difference maker was Pedro Morales in his first season. He was a guy that definitely had a vision. You could build a team around him. Now, when Kai Kamara was signed this off-season, he feels like a guy that could be the difference maker. And yes, he's had 2 injuries now, both groin, and you have to wonder, is it wise building then your team around a 33-year-old guy that might be a little bit injury prone? But I mean, he is the key guy. But then you bring in somebody like Felipe, who New York Red Bulls fans didn't want to lose him. He was a great addition for the Red Bulls when he joined them from Montreal. With both teams, Montreal and Red Bulls, he's always created. His delivery, his assists, everything's been great. But then he comes here, and again, something seems lacking in him. And then you have to put it down to the way that they're being asked to play. And I just don't think that suits the kind of players that have been brought in.
Well, to speak to Felipe's situation in particular, Felipe is not made to play defensive midfield position. And if you ask him to do so, you're not going to get the offensive output that you have seen Felipe do in Montreal or in New York, and I think that was part of his first performances for Vancouver. He was a bit too deep. But when looking at the Felipe example, I think it like you mentioned, it does show a certain amount of, I don't want to say stubbornness on just Carl Robinson's part, but sometimes in life, you got to make some lemonade with the lemons you're given, which means adapting to the players at hand. Is that a possibility? Should maybe tactically speaking and ideology of the team, like the philosophy of the brand of soccer they want to play, shouldn't it be molded to the players they have and not trying to fit the players into the mold of the team?
Oh, exactly, 100%. And that is where things seem to have fallen down in Vancouver the last couple of seasons. We've brought players in here such as Octavio Rivero, who just did not fit the style that he was being asked to play. Even last season, Freddie Montero did well. He had his best ever MLS season in terms of goals, but you were left with the feeling of how much more could he have done if the team was playing in a style that kind of suited how he was best to be playing. And we have that again here this season. Saturday was a prime example. Anthony Blondell started, Kai Kamara was on the bench, the team goes 1-0 down, so automatically you think, okay, Kamara's going to go on, the team's finally playing two strikers up front, we're going to see Kamara and Blondell, and then what happens, he takes Blondell off and puts Kamara on instead, so you've still really got, although it was two up front, it's still really only one striker that was doing that. And that's the kind of thing which there's been too many times, and yesterday was another example, where Carl Robinson said afterwards, oh, maybe I should have done that. And hindsight's always great, but he seems to just not make the right decisions at the right time.
Michael, Robbo in, Robbo out. Does that matter? Would it change in management, manager, make a significant difference in your opinion?
I honestly don't think it would, unless you change the things which are deeper rooted. And I know I keep saying that without really coming up with what is the deeper rooted things, but it just boils down to a lot of it is money. This is a club that when they filled in their recent poll that all the clubs were given as to what their ambition was, efficiency was the thing that stood out, not success. So this is a front office that has given Carl Robinson a medium-sized budget, and it's not a small budget. Last season, the Whitecaps were the 9th highest spending club. So you're not talking about a club that hasn't got some money, but it's how that money is spent, and I don't think it has been spent in a great way. When you look at the bench, for example, on Saturday, and I know some of it was rotation, but you've got some big players on there. Kamara, who was obviously injured, but Juarez, Shea, guys that are bringing a big salary. So the money is not being spent wisely. And I honestly don't think it would matter right now who you brought in. You have to overhaul every aspect of the club and make that club a team that is wanting to compete with the top echelons of MLS.
When you're looking at recruitment, the type of players that the Whitecaps bring in, I think from an outside perspective, it seems to me that they're kind of pigeonholed and looking at the same kind of player over and over again. Do you think they need to diversify where they're looking for players, where they're bringing players in from?
I feel yes, because this is a discussion we had in the off-season. I was speaking to one of the local journalists who is South American, and he was saying to me, why do they keep bringing in Latin American talent and then playing a style of football that is not a Latin American style? And then you also have an all-UK coaching staff trying to coach these Latin American players to play a UK coaching style. So to me, it doesn't mesh, and you should be looking maybe in different avenues. And Robinson does look in the UK a lot for players, but a big issue with that is salary. We won't pay the salaries that these guys are on. He's been offered a number of top lower league players in England over the last few years, but then it's perception. Like if he got offered a really top non-league player a couple of seasons ago. If you'd brought him in, then that just plays into there's no ambition there. You're bringing in a non-league player. But this guy would have been on a salary that was higher than some of the other guys that he gets in South America. But we also have the problem of the turf here, and a number of top players won't play in that turf week in and week out. So it's hard. South America is a great hole, a great well for him to go to, because you get cheap, unproven talent. But then you have to say, how often in this modern age of the internet is top talent going to be undiscovered down there?
Yep, and the other aspect too is because of Ezequiel Barco and Atlanta and other teams like Atlanta that spend a lot of money south of the equator over the last few years, the teams are a bit aware of the situation, and the prices do go up more quickly than before. So that is a situation too. Michael, here's a message I received from a fan on social media yesterday. He just listened to our show where we were talking about the Caps yesterday, and he had found himself hoping the last couple of games would actually be poor performances, so ownership will eventually be forced to confront structural issues and changes will be made. Seems like things might get worse before they get better. It's not that the Caps lost 4 of the last 5, it's that most of those losses have been emblematic of the structural and tactical issues that have plagued the club for years and led to embarrassing results. And he gets the sense the club would love to sweep such criticism under the rug with a win. Thank you, Steve O'Reilly 89 on social media, for your comment. Michael, is that sentiment prevalent right now in Vancouver?
I don't know if it's prevalent, but it is something that a lot of fans are feeling. I don't think Carl Robinson is going anywhere this season unless the team went on an absolutely massive losing streak. If they were to lose most of their games up to the World Cup break, for example, that would raise the pressure. But the way that the West is this year, the odd win here and there keeps them in the playoff spots. And as long as the team is in the playoff spots, and like I said at the start, that masks the fact that in points per game they're actually 7th and out of the playoff spots, but perception is everything. So the RSL win 2 weeks ago now, really, it kind of just papered over the cracks. And you do get the feeling that this team is going to keep getting those kind of results that does that. And it would take either Carl Robinson thinking, I want to kind of jump ship now whilst my reputation in the UK is intact and go and get a job back home, or a massive losing streak for him to go. Failing that, he's got a contract till 2020. This is a club that is efficient and does not waste money. They are not going to buy him out of a contract to get rid of him unless it's really, really drastic.
Now, for the immediate future, short term, Caps are still 5th in the Western Conference. It's not like it's all doom and gloom. What is the next step forward? Is there a better way? Like, in those players right now, is there better potential than we're seeing? Could this squad compete in the highest level of the Western Conference, which might not be as great as it used to be, but it's still pretty good. We're not talking about Beckham Galaxy here, but things are possible. Could a playoff spot still be possible with the squad they have right now if they can turn the situation around a bit?
Oh, very much so. I mean, the West, the last couple of seasons, is definitely worse than it was a few years back, and the East is the stronger conference by far. When you look at how deep the teams in the East are compared to the West, it's very easy for any team in the West this year to make the playoffs. And this is a squad that I genuinely believe, and Carl Robinson says this as well, and I've spoken to some of the players about it, and they feel the same. This is the deepest and probably the best squad that the Whitecaps have had in the MLS era. You're looking at competition at every place. Every single position, you've kind of got a veteran and a young guy battling for places, but the players are simply not performing. And you can point fingers at Robinson, you can point fingers at the front office. I've always been of the belief that the players have to take a big responsibility, and Saturday's game was a prime example of that. 19 chances created, I think it was something like 9 on target, but no goals. So these players have to do better. Saturday was a bad defeat. You're playing an undermanned, an understrength team already. They go down to 10 men. They could have won that in the first half. They had the chances. Not all of that falls in Robinson. Not all of it falls in the way that they're playing when they're creating the chances. So they just have to tweak a few things, and they can easily turn this around. It's not always going to be pretty. Again, I'm of the philosophy that it doesn't matter how you play, it's by any means necessary. You get the 3 points, and if they keep doing that every now and again, they will make the playoffs.
Well, yeah, precisely. I want to turn the tables a little bit more on the development side of things for the Whitecaps. They've always prided themselves a great deal on that side. Got rid of the USL team a couple of years ago. Now, or last year, I guess it would have been. What is the state of that academy project right now? Do you see, I know you're someone who follows it a little more closely than most, so do you see talent close to the pipeline, close to coming through that pipeline?
Yeah, there's still some great talent in the residency. And getting rid of WFC2 last season, to me, was a massive mistake. They've gone with the affiliation of Fresno. It's really been a bit of a disaster. A number of the top talent didn't want to go down to California. So they've gone to college. Some of them have gone overseas. Some of them just turned down deals and have joined other USL teams. So, I mean, that hasn't worked out great. There's 4 players, well, 5 now, because they've just loaned Justin Fittes down there. But, I mean, he was a draft pick, so not residency talent. But the problem has been we've had such good quality residency talent here over the years, but none of them seem to make the jump. I mean, you can point fingers at Alphonso Davies, but, I mean, really, he came to Vancouver pretty well developed from Edmonton. He is technically a residency talent, but there's been very few that's made the breakthrough. I mean, even Brett Levi's, who is held up as like a homegrown player, he came through Saskatchewan. So, I mean, we didn't have him in the residency program. There's some good players there. They need minutes. They need opportunities. We signed David Norman Jr. onto the squad this year, and he hasn't had a sniff of the first team. And getting rid of WFC2 thwarts these players' development. And I don't know what the answer is, apart from bringing the team back. But you've seen some loans, like Daniil Henry's gone to Ottawa. They need to get some more guys loaned out to these teams to get minutes and then just see what happens after that. But the talent is there. There's some really good guys. Theo Bayer, Thomas Hassel, the goalkeeper, Jose Hernandez. These are 3 guys that could do well, but it's whether they now go to college and get lost or what happens to them.
Yeah, interesting question. Okay, we'll wrap with this one. Michael, thank you for your time today. Alphonso Davies, a lot of people are questioning how he's being used. Do you feel he's being developed correctly with his first team minutes right now?
I don't think he is. He's getting a lot of experience in different positions, and that's great for him. But his game has come on better this year. So it's hard then to say he's not being developed. But you just feel there's so much more that he could give. And this moving him to left back has been baffling to me. And I spoke to him pre-season after it had first happened, and he didn't think he was doing very well back there. But it's something they've persevered with. There's a lot of his game that still needs honed, and I just don't think we're going to see the best of him until he moves on to another team, to be honest.
All right. Tell the listeners that aren't familiar with AFTN a little bit about that and where they can follow your work.
We're one of the main sites out here in Vancouver. You can follow us on aftn.ca. That's where all our stuff will go up. Big proponents of local soccer as well as Whitecaps. Give us a follow on AFTN Canada on Twitter as well.
Thank you, Michael, for your time today. We'll be right back after the break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. You like what we do? Go to patreon.com/Sports Podcasting Network. $2 goes a long way, and on top of it, you get a bonus Canadian soccer show once a week. talking about the Canadian Premier League and Canadian soccer as a whole. Joining us right now on the line, of course, Duane, as always, and Jonathan Tannenwald. First of all, I have to lay some ground rules down for you gentlemen today. It's a soccer show, okay? It's a soccer show, not talking about hockey.
No hockey at all?
Okay, fine. 1 minute of hockey. Congratulations.
All right. Well, we're talking about the Caps, right? A lot of Caps talk today. We just talked about the Caps, so we'll talk about the Caps some more. Jonathan, what do you think about the Caps?
I think we just lost Jonathan. Jonathan is back. Jonathan, what do you think about the Capitals? We'll give you at least a few moments to enjoy last night. You there, Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I had a bit of a call drop for a second, but I'm here now.
Perfect. Jonathan, congratulations on the Washington Capitals beating the Pittsburgh Penguins for the first time in a while.
It really happened. Duane, my God, it really happened.
It did. I was watching on my phone because it's 2018 and that's what you do nowadays. And I didn't actually see the puck go in, and I assumed that they had just stopped another breakaway because I've seen many. Jonathan, it's eerie how I'm old enough to remember 1988 and Dale Hunter's goal. It's a little eerie how close that is to that. Did you see this?
I absolutely did. I was 4 years old in the spring of '88, so I don't remember it. But I remember 96 and 95, that's for sure. And the last few years, obviously, and just knowing that no matter what happened, there was no way that the Capitals would. And for the listeners who don't know, I grew up in the District of Columbia. There was no baseball in Washington at the time that I grew up. There was the Orioles that were an hour up the road in Baltimore. And for a lot of my generation, the Capitals were the team, and the football team also. But the Capitals were a team that we all grew up very attached to. And when you look around the soccer media, you see, Joshua Cloak of The Athletic pointed out last night. He noticed how many Capitals fans there were suddenly in the North American soccer media, and that is because a lot of us who are in our 20s and 30s grew up in the Washington area and grew up as Capitals fans. Paul Tenorio, myself,
Pablo.
Who else? Sebastian Salazar of ESPN.
Yeah.
Pablo Maurer.
Yeah.
Bo Durr of
True. Bo.
Formerly of USA Today, and Brian Strauss of Sports Illustrated are a little older, but they certainly remember '88 very well, I'm sure.
Okay,
yeah, knows what happened to me, but yeah.
Enough hockey. It's soccer today, and let's talk about soccer, gentlemen.
Well, it's funny you say that because I'm on the field at Talon Energy Stadium right now watching Union practice.
Well,
real quickly, Jonathan, I have a theory on that. You mentioned it has to have something to do with DC United and their success they had in the 90s. Right? I think that probably does speak a little bit to the amount of soccer journalists that evolved. It was one of the early success stories of MLS. Do you not think that might play a role in why there's so many people from that area?
I think it's two things. One, it's that, absolutely. And two is the Washington Post's early commitment to covering the sport in depth. Stephen Goff is somebody who a lot of us learned from over the years. I mean, Paul Tenorio worked with him at the Post. Will Coons, who works for Major League Soccer now, worked for ESPN for a long time, worked for Soccer America for a long time, worked with Steve at the Post. And I mean, when I was you guys know who Andres Cantor is, I assume. He's the very famous Spanish language broadcaster down here. For a while back in the day, Andres had a Friday column in the Washington Post sports section in Spanish on global soccer. And this was in the late 90s and the early 2000s. I don't think you would have found another newspaper in all the United States that would have been willing to do that.
Yep, no, that's probably true. Now you're on the field at Talon Energy Stadium, Philadelphia Union, and there's a new signee. They have a new player, but for a day only, to retire as a member of the Union, Sebastian Leteau. And when I think about Sebastian Leteau, Jonathan, there's just goals in mind at the beginning of the Montreal Impact history in MLS. I have a memory of Leteau scoring against Montreal and DeVio scoring against the Union. But that's just the beginning of MLS for me in my mind.
Was that the 5-3 game when DeVio scored a hat trick?
I think so, yeah. And Leteau scored.
I was there, I think. Yeah.
Yep, you were there. And I think we did a show after. But
Probably did, yeah.
What is your overall thought on Sébastien Atou? Yes, of course, Sébastien Atou played with different team, but he will be remembered as a superstar for the Union a few years ago.
Well, here is what I'll remember about Sébastien Atou. His legacy here is complicated in ways that go beyond goals. Obviously, he's the team's leading scorer. One of the reasons why he's the team's leading scorer is because they haven't signed all that many good strikers over the course of their history. You could make a fairly compelling case that at this point, the 9 years old, he should not be the team's leading scorer anymore, but he is because they haven't had. Hold on, I'm getting yelled at by other people. I'm in the middle of a live radio hit. You're welcome.
I love it.
Look, you can make a case that Sébastien Atou, as I said, should not be the leading goal scorer in Union history anymore, given that this team is now 9 years old, but he is. You can make a case that he shouldn't have been traded at the end of the 2011 season when he was at the peak of his talents here and the peak of his popularity here. You can also make a case that it was not. What I wrote in my story for this morning's Inquirer and Daily News is that he was one of the very few players in all of Union history who had name recognition beyond just the small core Union fan base. And that, in some ways, is not necessarily a good thing either. So when they traded him, people said they've traded the greater Philadelphia sports landscape said they've traded the guy I've heard of. How dare they? Which is a common trope in this town, and I'm sure in other towns as well.
Yeah.
But they brought him back in 2013, and at the time, some of us felt they brought him back as much for marketing purposes and to sort of apologize to fans, as for his talents. And he didn't play all that well in 2013. 2014, he played great. But then in 2015 and 2016, he regressed again. And by the time they traded him away again, there were not as many complaints because they understood that he was not the player that he used to be.
In a way.
And it's...
Oh, sorry, John.
Go ahead. He's now standing about 5 feet from me, so I'm trying to...
I was going to mention that he was a bit of a pioneer for French men's soccer player coming into Major League Soccer, coming before the hype, coming before the money, coming before the Thierry Henry of this world as well. How do you see Sébastien Atou as a pioneer, as a foreign player coming into Major League Soccer?
Well, remember, he came over here in the first place to sign with Seattle in the USL days. And then spent he spent a couple of years in the A-League, won an MLS, and then was taken in the expansion draft. And I had some French journalists back in the day who asked me about the guy when he was sort of at the peak of his scoring. And even yesterday, Philippe Auclair, who raced for France Football, was based over in Europe. Sent a note around with my story about here. It was this guy who went from sort of not being known at all in France to being a cult hero in the United States. So that was pretty cool. I was pretty cool and good for him. And I have thought for quite a while that French players in the French league are sort of an under-scouted and underexploited area in Major League Soccer. It started to change a little bit with Vincent Nogueira coming over here to the Union, Benoit Cheroux going to Toronto, although Cheroux obviously was a bit better known at that point. But it's interesting, Kevin. So and you guys can tell me what you think. I don't think there's really been all that much done with it in terms of attracting more French players to MLS since Atou was here. What do you think?
Certainly, you mentioned Greg Vandy's connections in Ligue 1 has brought over a few players. Mavinga, Cheroux, you mentioned Mavinga came in last year. But yeah, I still agree with you 100% that it's an area that they should be targeting a little bit more. I think that's a perfect sort of level to bring over to be highly successful in this league at a more affordable price than you're going to get guys from the...
Exactly right.
And that's probably going to change really soon with the transfer market opening this summer with Montreal now, Rémi Garden, after a few months of discovering Major League Soccer, he might know who to go get in his Rolodex in France. So we might have more French option in Major League Soccer coming real soon. I'll let Duane jump in with a question in a second. But Jonathan, when we're looking at the fans' perspective, the hardcore, the Sons of Bands, the supporters groups, how is Letou viewed? He is a bit of a cult hero, isn't it?
He absolutely is a cult hero. He became that not only for his exploits on the field, but for being very involved in the community off the field. He would go to lots of events, both official events and informal events. The fans love him, and he loved them back. And in that, in that regard, it is definitely, look, there is not anyone. If the Union are going to have a Ring of Honor, and you can make the case very easily that they haven't really earned one at this point, because they haven't been very good for very long at all during their history. If you're going to have one, then Sebastian Letou's name is the first one that goes in there, absolutely. Wow. Who else? Who knows? But Letou, yes, for sure.
There's a room for stuff. Danny Dichio is on TFC's Ring of Honor, and I mean, really, you look at his career at MLS, it's more about the cult and what he meant to the fans. I think there's room for that. Sports shouldn't be so literary sometimes.
I realize that, Duane, but the Union have stunk for most of their history.
Fair enough. All right. Speaking of which, I had the chance to watch them on Friday, and
they stunk then too.
It wasn't very pretty. And someone drew a list of the last 10 road victories the Philadelphia Union had, and Chivas USA was one of those road victories. Why are they so bad in the road? Why are they so bad?
That would be Mr. Matt DeGeorge, who's standing close by to me, I believe. He might have been on your show once or twice in the past. I'm not sure. Why are they so bad on the road? I don't know. I think it's because they aren't that good in the first place. That has historically been what it's been. And look, they keep talking about how they look for advantages in analytics and little things in the margins and so on. But the blunt truth is, in Major League Soccer, as with almost every other soccer league on the planet, the way you generally win games is you out-talent the other team. And almost every game they've played in their history, the Union have been out-talented. And it is, in fact, what has made the start to this season so disappointing. That they've dropped points and drawn games that they should have won and so forth. It's that they haven't really been out-talented by great margins by some of the teams they've played so far this season. Toronto, obviously, they were, and Jim Curtin admitted as much after the game. But, it's the games where the margin is closer, where they need to get the points, and they haven't been doing it.
I want to talk about that young back line. I've watched, for some reason, I've watched a lot of Union games this year, about 5 or 6 of them at least. Yeah, and it hasn't been pretty at the back. At what point you say, okay, we need to help these kids out? There's talent there, but they're getting overwhelmed a lot. Do they need to make some changes back there to help them for the immediate future?
Well, I think they've done it some with putting Ray Gaddison at left back. They don't really have a veteran center back at this point. And, Austin Trusty, I think, has been superb. He's been one of the Union's best players this year. And I feel very strongly that he should play, and he should play a lot, because he is an incredibly promising player, not only for the Union, but I feel for the U.S. national team, too. The problem this year has been Jack Elliott, who has made enough mistakes at this point for me to be worried. I wasn't initially, because he's very good at playing the ball out of the back. He's also pretty good at man marking, but he's made some mistakes. He's had some bad giveaways, things like that, and that's been the frustrating part. And they don't really have a better option on the roster at this point, which is too bad. But at the same time, the guys get better when they play, and I think that's been true for Trusty. I think it is, Elliott plays very well for 85 or 86 or 87 minutes and makes one really big mistake, and the big mistake is what frustrates him. So,
I'm going to ask you a question that I seem to ask you almost once a year, Jonathan. Is the seat getting hot for Jim Curtin?
Oh, I think so. I think it is. But, Ernie Stewart, who's the sporting director, won't say that it is. He continues to say that Curtin has his confidence. But if they're in the midst of playing 3 road games in the span of 9 days. They were in Toronto on Friday. They're in Columbus tomorrow. They go straight from Columbus to Montreal to play the Impact on Saturday. If they lose them all and this season's already toast, they're going to have to think about doing something. But what are they going to do when Curtin's got time left on his contract and they don't like spending money? So I don't know.
You just let's wrap with this, Jonathan. You mentioned they don't like to spend money. And we're kind of growing into a league of having to spend money just to compete and to stay afloat.
Well, that's correct. That's absolutely correct.
Is there a danger of, not saying becoming irrelevant and going to the Columbus route, but could that be a danger?
They're not going to get relocated.
No, but
the market is too big. But are they in danger of becoming irrelevant? They're already irrelevant in this town. And they're already irrelevant in the league. Absolutely. It is absolutely true.
What to do with it now? What's to do with outside of spending money?
That burden falls on the ownership.
Yeah. Spending money.
And it also falls on do the rest of the league's owners decide that they cannot have the team in the fourth largest television market in the country? They cannot have that team bringing up the rear in the way that they are and lagging behind everybody else, as I almost got decapitated by a soccer ball just now. If they decide that they can't have that, then there's going to be some pressure on this ownership group to get out. Well, and that might be the only thing that changes it.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for your time, Jonathan. We'll let you go.
It's a pleasure.
You got to get to safety.
Avoid getting decapitated.
Exactly. Go ahead. Go make sure that you're covered. Thank you for your time, Jonathan. You can follow Jonathan on social media at The Goalkeeper, and you can follow him on the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Daily News on a daily basis. We'll be right back, Duane and I, to just wrap the show for today.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Yeah, it's too bad we're doing live radio, because if we're doing live TV, we would have had one of those bloopers. Unfortunately, Jonathan is safe, but we all seen those moments of soccer journalists or reporters close to a soccer pitch not paying attention, then getting hit real hard with a size 5 soccer ball.
There's that German female reporter that got hit from you could see the ball coming in and off the top of the head. That's a famous blooper clip now.
Oh, yeah. And it's because it's a wide shot, you see the ball coming really clearly. Like, oh, man, it's coming right. Oh, it's going to hit her.
That's going to hit her.
Oh, it hit her. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was awesm. But
that wasn't really her fault, because she was, the shot was the other way. But
she was live. Hopefully Jonathan is okay. But it's interesting, Duane, when you think of Sebastian Letou, what is your memory that you remember? Basically, that's an oxymoron, but yeah.
I mean, just his head, his ability in the air, scoring goals. He was a guy that scored. He didn't score pretty goals usually. I mean, he was capable of it occasionally, but that wasn't really his MO. He was just one of those efficient. Alan Gordon. He was a guy like that. That's a very useful player in Major League Soccer, and at the peak of his powers, he absolutely was one of the top 5 or 6 forwards that you would think of that could really ruin your day as a fan of another team, right? And but that said, and although I agree with him getting on a wall of honor, and I mentioned Dicchio in the same breath, because I think there's similar players when they mean to a fan base that at the time that they're being talked about in that way hadn't had any success, right? So you hold on.
The first heroes. Yeah, well, he was the first hero, right? The first superstar. You always remember your first. We remember Captain America, the first Avenger. You remember the first things. You remember your first superstar. Remember the first DP, Montreal, Marco Di. First overall draft pick, Andrew Wenger. Long time ago. But you remember the first. And for Philadelphia, Sebastian Letou, their first soccer star in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, precisely. And so I don't hold a grudge. And people will make fun of teams like that, but no, you can't. It matters to the fans, and that's all that matters. So good for him and good for the union for having this. But there's no doubt as well that, they're likely doing this partly to distract from what has been a very poor start again. And as Jonathan says, this is a club that irrelevance is a strong word to use, but it's kind of accurate in this particular case because you don't think of the Union unless you're playing them that week. I mean, I've seen them a lot this year, but it's been happenstance because they happen to play teams that I want to watch, and they're the Washington Generals, of that particular moment.
That's hilarious. Who's the Globetrotters, though? That's the question. If they're the Generals, who's the Globetrotter? By the way, we're giving flag. We need to talk about this week at one point. How Orlando's on fire. How Orlando just keeps winning. And we're not even talking about it, but Orlando just keeps on winning. I guess they finally figured out how to play Kleshton and the rest of the boys together to have results. But we'll might talk about this tomorrow before we talk the midweek game. But to wrap the show up today, Duane, we've talked about the Whitecaps. We've talked about the Union. Of course, the Union are bottom dwellers in the Eastern Conference. The Whitecaps, it's not as bad. It's 5th right now, 7 in the points per game if you use your game in hands and get 50% of those. What is the best teams out of the two? Of course, it's going to be easy to say Vancouver, but when you take the two teams right now and you're trying to project them next year and the year after, which one of those two teams that we talked about will be relevant in the playoffs first?
Well, the Caps to me are always going to be relevant when your baseline is playoffs, but I don't think your Caps are going to be often relevant when it comes to the top teams, the truly contending teams. And as I said, they are going down that road of try and set themselves so they finish top 6 consistently and they can get on a roll in the playoffs. But I don't know whether that's a model that's going to work anymore in MLS, particularly as the league grows. I suspect that they will try. There will be pressures on them to keep the playoff format maybe as it stands now. They're already tough on their time. I think there's a lot of people that feel that they need to shorten it, not lengthen it. So the more sort of less percentage of teams that get into that bubble, the more difficult it's going to be meh and hope for a run in the playoffs because it's going to be less relevant at that point. So I'd say Vancouver, but I do that without a great deal of excitement when I say it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, it's enough for today. Let's go back to the drawing board, and tomorrow we promise you we'll come back with the medals of the weekend. We tried yesterday, and we tried today, but things happen, and soccer world happens, and people retire, and Vancouver people wanted to hear more about Vancouver. So tomorrow, our medals of the weekend, and as well, the preview of the midweek games in Major League Soccer. We have, 4 games tomorrow? A lot of games.
Yeah, there's 5, I believe, on the schedule. So it's the first full midweek schedule of the MLS season. I think tomorrow we'll try and work in some European talk as well. We haven't talked about Clasico. There's a lot that happened this past weekend. A lot on the relegation side of things that'll be interesting. Interesting match today as well.
Cardiff has been promoted. Cardiff is going back to the Premier League. One of my least favorite owners in the entire world, Vincent Tam. That little greasy mustache is back in the Premier League.
Junior Halat voted their player of the year as well today. So it's a lot to talk about. We'll have a full show tomorrow for sure. But on that note, as always, I will put my Capitals jersey back on, and not my Whitecaps jersey because I don't own one of those. But I have my Capitals jersey, and I will go streak with nothing but my Caps stuff on around the city of Toronto and confuse the hell out of people for the rest of the day. Kevin, in the meantime, you say goodbye.
You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. We'll be back tomorrow. As always, 10 a.m. I know sometimes it's 11 when we have guests in the West Coast. That's what happens. It's far away and it's 3 hours earlier, so sometimes it's a bit too early. But we'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Patreon.com is where you can support us financially. If you can't support us financially, share the show, like the show, subscribe on YouTube, on iTunes, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Make sure you drop a subscribe. Make sure you turn on your notifications. And make sure you retweet the show. This helps a lot as well. And of course, your patronage, your support financially, helps produce this show on a daily basis. So we do thank you for your time. And until tomorrow, it's now a classic. Have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.